Privileges in the congregation. A throwback Thursdays. HAWKE'S, Tawk, and Squawk. So earlier today, I'm out, handling some business. And what do I see but some Jehovah's Witnesses doing their little cart witnessing? They got me to thinking like, man, if they had these around when I was still in, I could have knocked out 100 hours a month easy. Full-time pioneer status. Yeah, but anyway, seeing the witnesses, it was a younger brother and an older brother. And it kind of reminded me of when I worked behind the magazine counter with an older brother during my time at the West Park congregation. That was one of my responsibilities in the congregation. And that's how brothers prove they're exemplary, by having responsibilities in the congregation. They call it responsibilities, privileges, or whatever. My homie Nad Raj, my J-Dub homie, would always be hyped. Like, I got the privileges. But anyway, my first, after being baptized or whatever, one of my first privileges in the congregation was carrying the microphones. That's usually how all of the young brothers start out once they're baptized. Either carrying the mics or operating the stage, like the microphones on the stage, or operating the sound system. To me, I love the sound system. They maybe think I was a DJ or a producer or some shit. My mind was always wandering. I was always daydreaming. I hated doing the stage. But carrying the mics was cool because it gave me a chance to exercise, and it seemed like that made the time go faster when you was carrying the mics. I loved working the sound system too. The sound system was cool. Me and Naraj, we took turns operating the sound system. Now, when it came to carrying the mics, it was a handful of brothers that would do that. I would usually, out of the 2 meetings a week, the 2 times a week that we met at the Kingdom Hall, I usually carried the mics usually once. You carry the mics during the Sunday Watchtower session. Thursdays, then when it switched over to Tuesday, the Theocratic Ministry School, you would carry the mics. Sometimes they would have extra discussions that was like question and answer, and where the audience would be involved, and you would carry the mics for that. Then when they had the congregation book study during the week of the circuit overseer visit, you had mic carriers for that. So it seemed like once a week, I was usually carrying the mics, or every meeting I was doing something. Sometimes I would opt to do the sound system. Other times I didn't mind carrying a mic, but as far as the stage, I tried to avoid that as possible. I usually save that for James Hearns Jr., Nad Rogers' older brother. He didn't mind doing the stage because where they sat at right in the front was right near the stage. So he was a fat, lazy dude anyway. So sometimes he would refuse to do anything altogether, would rather sit during the meeting and eat candy or whatever. But I would say about a year or so after I was baptized, I was put in charge of the magazine counter. Now you had the literature counter and the magazine counter. They were right next to each other. So, my cousin Sheaf, he worked the literature counter with this other goofy ass brother. I'll get to that clown in a minute. Meanwhile, I did the magazines with another older brother. He was a good guy. We got along pretty good. The magazine counter was sweet. The only thing is you would have to be at the Kingdom Hall a good 30 to 45 minutes before the meeting started to pass out the magazines, and after the meeting you had to go right to your post. But 15-20 minutes I would be done and I could mingle or whatever. But whoever wanted to talk to me would always come to the magazine counter and we would chop it up while I was handling my business. Now the clown that worked with my cousin Sheaf, this guy was a clown, brother Noah Gundy. Couldn't stand him. Real like geeky cat. Light skin, had the curly hair. Thought he was anything but black. And I always had the impression that he didn't like me. I was a badass kid because he had came to the West Park congregation in the early 90s when I was still a little badass youngin' running around. So I got the impression that he never really liked me, which was cool because I always thought he was a goofball anyway. So, and like I said, the magazine and the literature counter was all in the same area. So it's after one meeting, I have all the magazines laid out. And like half the counter was for the magazines and the other half was for the literature. He must have had an attitude or something. And he goes and pushes the magazines down like you're taking up too much space, blah, 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 with a little bass in his voice. And me, my first reaction is to haul off and smack the shit out of him. But I'm like, nah, I can't do that here. My next reaction was to cuss him the fuck out. It's like, nah, I can't really do that. So I calmly placed my hand on his shoulder, collected myself, and like, listen, I'm not that little boy that used to run around. I know you never really cared for me or whatever. That's cool because I don't like you either. And I don't care who you go tell because I know you a tattletale and you be kissing these elders behind. But don't you ever in your life talk to me like that again and move my stuff out the way like I don't matter. My cousin Sheaf, he know how I am, so he kind of like intercepted and was like, nah, Brother Gundy, it's cool, They wasn't taking up too much space. He diffused the situation, but I had to tell cousin, I'm like, nah, you need to get your mans and let him know because he ain't gonna talk to me like that. Never had an issue with him again. Then a couple months later, we moved to another Kingdom Hall from 61st and Haverford down to the duplex on 43rd and Haverford. Now at that Kingdom Hall, it was a much bigger space, so there wasn't no issue about having only set amount of counter space. But anyway, I only really had privileges not even a whole 2 years. From the time I was baptized, I think I started carrying the mics within 2 weeks after becoming baptized. Carrying the mics, working the sound system, doing the stage once in the blue, working behind the magazine counter. And that was about it. And a couple of times helping my homie Clayton out because he was a ministerial servant, helping him with the contribution box. But that was about it. Less than 2 years later, when Kenji and his stink breath sidekick came and made things difficult, I handed in my privileges anyway, because as I stated in a previous video about coming to the wedding dressed down and all that, I knew they was going to try to take my privileges, quote unquote, sit me down, but I beat them to it. And this was in April of 2004. So I had privileges maybe a good year and 7 months. And later on that year, 2004, they asked me that I want to resume my responsibilities in the congregation. I wasn't going to jump the gun and be like, oh, yes, please, brother. But I was like, sure, okay. But then they went to ask my mom, was I worthy? Was I exemplary? My mom was always a noodle anyway. She tells them no, all because I called a young sister a slut, which she was. So it wasn't like I was lying, but it is what it is. I didn't resume having privileges until I went to the Northeast congregation, and up there, you didn't even really have to be classified as exemplary. You could miss a whole month's worth of meetings and finally come back to the hall, and they might be short on brothers like, hey, such and such, I knew you haven't been here in the past month, but we need you to carry the microphones during the watchtower. I mean, they was real laid back up at the Northeast congregation. Well, I'm trying to think. I don't really have that many stories when it comes to, it was one time when these sisters we knew from North Jersey came down to Philly for the weekend. You know, that Saturday we had went out, basketball game, and we went skating. Then that Sunday they came to our Kingdom Hall. Then we went bowling later on that evening, then out to eat or whatever. Dad Rouse was mad because one of the girls that he was feeling, she was really feeling me. And they was sitting right over where the sound system was located. So I was sitting with them during the meeting. I made Dad Rouse. I was like, nah, you do the sound system. Like we usually would switch up. Like if he did the sounds like on that Tuesday or Thursday meeting and I would do it Sunday and vice versa, we would switch up. But the previous meeting I did this, he had did the sound system. So it was my turn. I was like, nah, you got it this week and I'll get it the next 2 weeks. He was mad because he really wanted to sit and chop it up with the sisters during the meeting. Now, Sheaf had came over too. We was all sitting together because it was like 4 sisters from North Jersey, and it was me, Sheaf, and Naraj, and we was all hanging out that weekend. So me and Sheaf, we're talking. This is right before they're about to do the opening song. So we're talking. Naraj is already in his feelings, so he's mad because he's not a part of the conversation. He's mad because he's not part of the conversation. So he turns to me and like, shushing me like, nigga, who the f is you shushing? Same thing with Brother Gundy. I couldn't punch him in his mouth and I couldn't cuss him out. So I calmly walked up to him, placed my hand on his shoulder. I'm like, if you ever shush me again like that and try to embarrass me, I'll take your hair and I'll smash it against this sound system. And you go tell your pop or whoever, your pop don't want no smoke with none of my uncles. Believe that. And they live right around the corner. He was like, oh no, I was shushing everybody because I was like, nah, you was shushing me, you and your feelings like a female. You know what I mean? Because you're obsessed with Sheep, so you wasn't shushing him, and I know you wasn't shushing none of the sisters. So I know that was solely directed at me. I had to get with Naraj on a few different occasions like that, but that's all another story for another video. But yeah, like having privileges in the congregation, I mean, to me, it wasn't a big deal, but the cats like that, right? I don't want to lose my privileges. I'm an exemplary brother. And then even after I sat myself down, because I wasn't going to let Kenji and Stink Breath Hollow Man sit me down and had them thinking that they sunned me. But, you know, to a lot of brothers, having those responsibilities is such a big deal. But hey, you know what I mean? I didn't mind sitting and daydreaming during the meeting. And if I needed to stretch, I would always get up and walk outside to the lobby or even go outside and get some fresh air. But anyway, this was a little Hawks Talk and Squawk. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content. Hawk out.